Now go.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 36th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress as shown here. Previous episodes of this, The Secret Doctrine, and the new Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald in the webinar you wish to view. You can register for these webinars on the homepage of moriafederation.com. It is up there in the left top corner of the homepage. Okay, so we are near the beginning of the last section of this chapter on Hermes Trismegistus, called Mander, the Vision of Hermes. It's quite a narrative. It sounds a lot like the old commentary in DK's teachings, and it's very rich, very powerful. So I think you'll enjoy it. In order to keep the narrative uninterrupted from this point till the end, see, we're here down just a couple of paragraphs down. Let's start by taking a look at the illustration at the center of the next page. This symbolic drawing from Bryant's mythology is entitled A Greek Form of Hermes. Can we get a reader for the caption that appears beneath this illustration?
The name Hermes is derived from Herm, a form of Haram, the personified universal life principle, generally represented by fire. The Scandinavians worshipped Hermes under the name of Odin. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The Teutons as Woden, and certain of the Oriental peoples as Buddha or Foe. There are two theories concerning his demise. The first declares that Hermes was translated like Enoch and carried without death into the presence of God. The second states that he was buried in the valley of Ebron and a great treasure placed in his tomb, not a treasure of gold, but of books and sacred learning. The Egyptians likened humanity to a flock of sheep. The supreme and inconceivable father was the shepherd, and Hermes was the shepherd dog. The origin of the shepherd's crook in religious symbolism may be traced to the Egyptian rituals. The three scepters of Egypt include the shepherd's crook, symbolizing that by virtue of the power reposing in that symbolic staff, the initiated pharaohs guided the destiny of their people.
Okay, thanks, Biel. So first up, the name Hermes is derived from Herm, a form of Chiron, the personified universal life principle, generally represented by fire. There's a lot in that statement. And these two quotes give further insight into the connection between King Hiram and Chiron, Hermes, and the Philosopher's Stone, which are all synonyms. So could we get a reader, please?
Andrea, can you read that, please?
Yes. This general solvent, or menstruum universal, which at the same time was to possess the power of removing all the seeds of disease out of the human system and renewing life, was called the, quote, philosopher's stone, unquote, lapis philosophorum, and its possessors were styled adepts. The science of alchemy is as old as the history of philosophy itself. The Egyptian Hermes has been claimed as its author, and many books on the subject of magic are to be attributed to him. General History of Freemasonry, 81. For the secret work of Chiron, or King Hiram in the Kabbalah, quote, one in essence, but three in aspect, unquote, is the universal agent, or lapis philosophorum. The culmination of the secret work is spiritual perfect man at one end of the line. The union of the three elements is the occult solvent in the, quote, soul of the world, unquote, with the cosmic soul or astral light at the other end.
Thank you. So, Herm, Chiron, the universal agent, lapis philosophorum, which is the philosopher's stone, the occult solvent, and menstruum universale are all synonyms for the, quote, personified universal life principle, generally represented by fire, thus revealing that physical alchemy, that is, alchemy as is practice, was and is a grand metaphor for spiritual transmutation. We touched on this in an earlier webinar, but it's been a while. Okay, next, the Scandinavians worshipped Hermes under the name Udan, the Teutons as Wotan, and certain of the Oriental peoples as Buddha or Fo. I like that. Fo suggests Fohat, doesn't it? So the only doctrinal connection between these great teachers is that they all personify the light of the world through a new and original revelatory teaching in their respective cultures. Can we get a reading for this, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Shambhala, the spiritual hierarchy and humanity, the Father's house, the kingdom of God, and the world of men, are all striving in one vast movement for an intensification of the light of the world. This light will radiate in a fashion unknown before, not only the Father's house, which is the source of all our planetary light, but also the spiritual center from which have come all those teachers and world saviors who have stood before men and said, as did Hermes, the Buddha, and the Christ, I am the light of the world. This light will now flood the world of men, bringing illumination to men's minds and light into the dark places of human living.
Thank you, Martha. Excuse me. Okay, next, the statement about Hermes' death. Interesting, but as usual, HPB gives us a more esoteric perspective. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes. And Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
As to Enoch, Thoth, or Hermes, Orpheus and Cadmus, these are all generic names, branches, and offshoots of the seven primordial sages, incarnated Dhyan Chohans or Devas, in elusive, not mortal bodies, who taught humanity all it knew and whose earliest disciples assumed their masters' names. This custom passed from the fourth to the fifth race, hence the sameness of the traditions about Hermes, of whom Egyptologists count 5, Enoch, etc. They are all inventors of letters. None of them dies, but still lives, and they are the first initiators into and founders of the mysteries.
Thank you. Any questions about this concept? You can see the higher perspective that HPB has here. Finally, an exoteric statement about the Egyptian origins of the crook and staff. Again, Gerald Massey sheds further light in his The Natural Genesis, Volume 1. Could we get a reader, please?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Did you say me?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Your audio is burbling, BL. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it sounds like an internet connection rather than your mic, but anyway. Go ahead, Scott.
Bacchus, lord of the human nature, in being raised again, ascends from the waters, and in the character of the twice born, was called the fan man or winnower. The initiated in the greater mysteries were purified with water and breathed on, fanned or winnowed by the purifying spirit. The two symbols held in the hands of the Egyptian gods, the Hek or Ot, Crook, and the Key, are signs of these two truths. The hook, which denotes laying hold of, is the determinative of matter as out. And the key is a fan, a sign of breath or spirit. The two truths are represented by the water and the spirit or ghost in the dual baptism practiced in many lands and in all the known mysteries. The two baptisms of the Gnostics were recognized by them as the animal and the spiritual.
Thank you, Scott. You know, I was just thinking about some reading I did about Neith, who's the Egyptian Athena, and the part of the mythology for both really was that they netted. That's what Neith means. They netted acolytes, or those who would seek salvation, quote unquote, from the waters, which represents the matter aspect, right? And then bring them into the element of air. And I'm getting a sense of these two qualities of water and air in that story. Okay. The image from Bryant's mythology that MPH chose to use for this depicts a combination of Hermes and Anubis called Herm Anubis, holding an unusual form of the caduceus and standing on Apophis, the dragon of ignorance, with various symbols arrayed about him, including a bust of Serapis, the Alexandrian solar god who we studied earlier in this webinar series, a feather, symbol of the goddess Ma'at, who personifies truth, morality, order, and justice, a sprig of the evergreen acacia, which represents the immortality of the soul, a five-pointed star called Seba in ancient Egypt, which connotes, among other things, the discipline of spiritual study, and was the symbol of the followers of the god Osiris, a six-pointed star of the union of the pairs of opposites of spirit and matter, soul and personality. It also symbolized the dictum taught by Hermes, as above, so below. And finally, the upward pointing triangle, symbol of the purifying fire of spirit. The M, and you can see it engraved here, probably stands for Mercurius. Since this is all a Greek Roman depiction. I'm not sure about these three objects. If you have any insight on them, let me know. They may represent different types of offering. This could be wine or oil. And who knows? If you know, speak up. Here's a sculpture of Herm Anubis. I've shown you this before in other webinars.
Francis?
Just a sec. Now in the Vatican Museum, holding the same unusual form of the caduceus. Okay, go ahead, Biel.
Please go back to the other image.
Sure.
Okay. Anne Veronica says, yeah, this one. Anne Veronica says the word up there by Hermes, the K Aries Omega N or whatever,
Right.
is actually Chiron, and it means dog.
It means dog. Interesting. I mean, immediately I'm
And
thinking, go ahead.
I was wondering if that was a dog head on him.
Well, this is a better image, and it is
Yeah.
Anubis, which is the dog head. Herm Anubis is the name of this composite god. And of course, the dog head and the dog star and the source of Sirius, certainly there's certainly some reference there, some connotation esoterically, yeah, well, thanks for that. Yeah.
And then she added, it said before that Hermes is the dog of the shepherd.
Right. That's right. That's part of the text, isn't it? Let me get back here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see here. It says here. Where does it say that? Yeah. Yeah. The spring evening. So the father was the shepherd and Hermes was the shepherd dog. Right. Yeah. I know it's not in dark, but that's what it says. Yeah. Yeah. Good connotations there. And Chiron and Chiram are certainly connected. I don't know enough to follow it further than that, but who knows? Okay, interesting. Thanks for that. And of course, many of these symbols have their place in masonry as well as in alchemy. All right. So, thoughts or questions about this illustration? Anything else? This suggests, I didn't cover this symbol. I think this is like a globe, the world maybe strangely positioned. But alrighty then. Let's back up a page and continue with Hermes' vision of Mander. So far in the narrative, Hermes has gone into a deep meditation in an isolated desert place, at which time a great dragon with, quote, wings stretched across the sky and light streaming in all directions from its body appeared. When Hermes beseeched it to reveal its identity, the dragon identified itself as Mander, the mind of the universe, the creative intelligence, and the absolute emperor of all. Hermes then, quote, besought Mander to disclose the nature of the universe and the constitution of the gods. The dragon acquiesced, bidding Trismegistus hold its image in his mind. There's so much orientation towards mind and creative intelligence, the third aspect at its highest level here. And I think Hermes was an avatar of this third aspect, a reinstitutor of civilization. Can you say reinstitutor? Don't know. Okay, this brings us to the present point in the narrative, which continues on the last page, on the last paragraph of page 38 in the folio edition. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Yvonne, can you read that, please?
Sure. Immediately, the form of Mandras changed. Where it had stood, there was a glorious and pulsating radiance. This light was the spiritual nature of the great dragon itself. Hermes was raised into the midst of this divine effulgence, and the universe of material things faded from his consciousness. Presently, a great darkness descended and expanding swallowed up the light. Everything was troubled. About Hermes swirled a mysterious watery substance which gave forth a smoke-like vapor. The air was filled with inarticulate moanings and sighings, which seemed to come from the light swallowed up in the darkness. His mind told Hermes that the light was the form of the spiritual universe, and that the swirling darkness which had engulfed it represented material substance.
Okay, so first up, Pymander's transformation into a body of light and the raising of Hermes. Pymander's quote-unquote glorious and pulsating radiance continuously demonstrates on causal levels. It was the fact that Hermes was granted vision on these higher planes that allowed him to experience Pymander's divine effulgence. In fact, this term, the divine effulgence, suggests a very high level, beyond soul, more akin to a monadic essence. In fact, the statement, the light was the form of the spiritual universe, suggests that Hermes was raised to the Akashic plane, where this kind of light demonstrates. Pistis Sophia gives a beautiful description of the many graded levels of light. In fact, these descriptions permeate Pistis. This is just an example of one of them. Could we get a reader, please?
Trudy, can you read that, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
But they only saw the light which cast forth many rays of light, and the rays of light were not equal to one another. And the light was of many kinds, and it was of different types from below upwards. That one ray was many times more excellent than another, in a great glory of light to which there was no measure. It reached from the earth below upwards to the heavens. From Pistis Sophia 5.
Thank you. So, you know, what's unusual to me about this is usually when you're talking about greater and lesser and different types, you're talking about some beings or forms of beings, but this is all in the language of light, you know, all these different types of light. Many times more excellent than others. You know, it's quite a description. Okay, next up. The rest of this paragraph describes a great darkness, which Hermes, now guided by Pymander, recognizes as being symbolic of material substance in contradistinction to the light substance of the spiritual universe. The inarticulate moanings and sighings are symbols for the suffering that is the hallmark of separative consciousness. So, you know, in this passage, we have outlined the fundamental duality of spirit and form. This smoke-like vapor is interesting because it's what happens when light and water meet. You get steam, which DK talks a lot about as being a preliminary stage for some or those who are rising into the light, and it's initially very confusing. Any thoughts about this? Up till now, Hermes is, yeah.
Oh, sorry. And Veronica says one, and this is in reference to the comments earlier. One of the centaurs was called Chiron, son of Saturn, Chronos for us, which implies chrono, time, and a nymph. He was a healer. You know, that was in reference to your,
Right,
to Chiron the dog, and yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's, again, we have that third aspect, you know, Saturn is the lord of the third ray. So it's all of a piece there. Except normally we think of Sirius as the, in relation to our solar logos as the soul is to the personality. And so we think of it along second ray lines, but its orientation to light, I think, is what connects it to Hermes. Okay. So next up, can we get a reader?
Okay. Vivian, can you read that, please? But first, I just wanted to say that Yvonne typed in Chiron, the wounded healer.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right.
Then out of the imprisoned light, a mysterious and holy word came forth and took its stand upon the smoking waters. This word, the voice of the light, rose out of the darkness as a great pillar, and the fire and the air followed after it. But the earth and the water remained unmoved below. Thus the waters of light were divided from the waters of darkness, and from the waters of light were formed the worlds above, and from the waters of darkness were formed the worlds below. The earth and the water next mingled, becoming inseparable, and the spiritual word, which is called reason, moved upon their surface, causing endless turmoil.
Thank you. Okay, a comment about Chiron. Chiron, Chiram, King Hiram, and Hermes, are all of a piece in this. And it's interesting that in the case of Chiron, you have the wounded healer. Any god incarnate is inherently wounded. It suggests one who has descended from the perfect realms into the imperfect, or from the higher into the three realms of human endeavor. It would be interesting to study this further, the connection between these very similar names. Okay, so back to this. So when I first read this, I thought it was describing the evolutionary ascent of the imprisoned light of the soul, as symbolized by the myths of Ishtar, Persephone, Sophia, and in modern theosophy. But after reading the rest of Hermes' vision, I realized that actually it represents a much earlier stage when the four primordial elements were, through a sounding of the word, separated from their homogeneous state and stratified to form the four lower planes of the cosmic physical plane. So first, then out of the imprisoned light, a mysterious and holy word came forth and took its stand upon the smoking waters. So what is this imprisoned light? Light is substantive. And in this early stage, we're here being told, formed part of the one homogeneous substance. Then the word, which is the creative aspect of the logos, called Vash among the Hindus, initiated the separation of the elements, as we find in the next line. This word, the voice of the light, rose out of the darkness as a great pillar, and the fire and the air followed after it, but the earth and the water remained below. So exoterically, as we often find in the Bible, for instance, the word is described as an actual lingual command, specific words. Esoterically, the word represented by the letters A, U, and M are a vibratory emanation imbued with logoic intent. In this case, organized in such a way that it would directly influence the elements air, and fire, which were to form the Buddhic and mental planes, which inherently resonate with the sound and so, quote unquote, followed after it. You could say that the word, through its resonant connection with these two elements, literally lifted them or separated them from the other two elements, water and earth, which were to become the primordial elements of the material realm. And they remained unmoved by the word because they were by design incapable of responding to the frequency and quality of the word. Does that make sense? Any thoughts about this? Okay. Next. Thus the waters of light were divided from the waters of darkness. And from the waters of light were formed the worlds above, and from the waters of darkness were formed the worlds below. So water is here used to mean all substance. It's the generic term for the substantive realm, right? The material aspect. Reminding us that during periods of manifestation, the higher worlds are also substantive, beautifully described here as the waters of light. For humanity, the dividing line between these higher and lower waters, between the above and the below, is the fourth subplane of the mental plane. But this is a relative division. The last part of stanza 3, verse 7, describes this separation in more cosmic terms. Behold him lifting the veil and unfurling it from east to west. He shuts out the above, that's the waters of light, and leaves the below to be seen as the great illusion. He marks the places for the shining ones and turns the upper into a shoreless sea, again the water metaphor, of fire, and the one manifested into the great waters. So you see that this metaphor of the waters of light and the waters of darkness is carried in these stanzas as well. Next, the earth and the water next mingled, becoming inseparable. And the spiritual word, which is called reason, moved upon their surface, causing endless turmoil. So the mixture of the primordial elements of earth and water created the diversity of the form aspect. Insight into a higher meaning of the word reason, which in this context causes endless turmoil in the world, and is given by TK and EP in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1. Could we get a reader for this passage, please?
Yes. Fred, can you read that for us, please?
Living structure as it expresses, I can't read that word, ideas, the intricate beauty of the inner relationships within the expressing whole, the circulation of the energy which is working out the divine ideas. The points of force and local points of energy which act as power and light stations within that whole. All these stand revealed to the man who is, and I'm black, permitted as a soul to meditate upon such a phase as inclusive reason.
Right.
The reason here referred to is that pure intuitional, infallible comprehension, which grasps cause and effect simultaneously and sees why and whence end and to what end all things are moving.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, so you can see that this is different than the usual definition of reason. You know, this isn't about, oh, be reasonable. You know, in other words, you know, get it together and, you know, employ your lower mind. It's not that. It's intuitional, and it's that pure intuitional, infallible comprehension which grasps cause and effect simultaneously. It's important to keep that in mind as we go through this narrative, because reason figures very prominently in Hermes' narrative here. So, next question then is, why does reason cause endless turmoil? Anyone care to forward a theory as to why
It,
we
it
Go ahead.
brings to mind obsession. That obsession begins in reasoning, and then it combines with emotion, but perseveration is actually a mental quality.
Yeah, it is. I think this turmoil is initially experienced mentally, but then it's reflected into the astral body. You know, turmoil has a astral quality to it. Anyone else have a thought about this? Remember,
And Veronica,
go ahead.
sorry. And Veronica says in a lower spiral, I have a feeling that it talks about birth and the forming of the higher and lower chakras in the human body.
Yeah.
I guess as above, so below.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but I think it's it's one place where it demonstrates for sure that the interrelation between the higher and the lower, specifically between, you know, the sacral and the throat and the heart and the solar plexus, those interrelations would demonstrate this turmoil, right?
She goes on to say reasoning is formative in nature, and without the higher aspect, it forms without the higher light.
Yes, indeed, which in itself creates turmoil. But I'm getting a sense from this writing that the effect of reason, which, you know, it's almost like, you know, it breathes upon the waters, right? And therefore troubles them, you know. To me, this is, well, since humanity is ruled by the fourth ray of harmony through conflict, at first the energy of reason is experienced as provocative. You know, we have a symbol for this in Jacob wrestling the angel, you know, which is a metaphor for the struggle between, well, to say it one way, between those lower elements of earth and water with the higher of fire and air, of, said another way, of soul and personality rays, the ray makeup of the soul and personality, right? Between the horizontal and vertical members of the cross, which is another symbol for the fourth ray. But the response is tumultuous or provokes turmoil because humanity is ruled by the fourth ray, which is harmony through conflict. And that's a process of becoming, right? You start with conflict, eventually to reach harmony, in order to reach harmony. Any thoughts about this? Oh, I didn't spell angel right. Okay. So could we get a reader for this next passage?
Kirsten, can you read that for us, please? You're still muted.
Sorry.
Yeah, you turned
Sorry.
your video on.
Yeah,
There you
yes, I
go.
did.
There you go.
Sorry. Yes, sorry. Then again was heard the voice of Mandar, but his form was not revealed. I, thy God, am the light, and the mind, which were before substance, was divided from spirit, and darkness from light. And the word which appeared as a pillar of flame out of the darkness is the Son of God, born of the mystery of the mind. The name of that word is reason. Reason is the offspring of thought, and reason shall divide the light from the darkness and establish truth in the midst of the waters. Understand, O Hermes, and meditate deeply upon the mystery. That which in you sees and hears is not of the earth, but is the word of God incarnate. So it is said that divine light dwells in the midst of mortal darkness, and ignorance can't divide them. The union of the word and the mind produces the mystery which is called life. As the darkness without you is divided against itself, so the darkness within you is likewise divided. The light and the fire which rise are the divine man ascending on the path of the word. In the path of the word, and that which fails to ascend is a mortal man, which may not partake of immortality. Learn deeply of the mind and its mystery, for therein lies the secret of immortality.
Thank you. Okay, so first up, then again was heard the voice of Mander, but his form was not revealed. I, thy God, am the light, and the mind which were before substance was divided from spirit, and darkness from light. Okay, if for a moment we just consider the part of the sentence that references light, we get, I, thy God, am the light, before darkness was divided from light. So any being who can say, I, thy God, is a singularity. So we're not talking about the first logos here, which was not an individual point of reference, right? But was the sum total. So, so in this case, we could assume, because of his description, that it is the first singularity, who is the third logos, the one before it diversified into the seven, because it's through that diversification that darkness was divided from light. Of course, there's two forms of darkness: the pure darkness from which light emanates. You could say that it's the manifestation of that higher form of darkness. And then there's the other darkness, the darkness of ignorance, the lower darkness, the darkness of materiality. Okay, the other part of the statement could be read, I, thy God, am the mind, which existed before substance was divided from spirit. Okay, this level of mind is called in theosophy divine ideation. So let's find out a little more about this high point, which Mander identifies himself with. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Eleanor, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. The underlining idea in this symbol is very beautiful, and it shows, furthermore, its identical parentage in all the religious systems. Whether in the lotus or water lily shape, it signifies one and the same philosophical idea, namely the emanation of the objective from the subjective, divine ideation, passing from the abstract into the concrete or visible form. For as soon as darkness has disappeared in its own realm of eternal light, leaving behind itself only its divine manifested ideation, the creative logo, have their understanding opened, and they see in the ideal world, here whatever concealed in the divine thought, the archetypal forms of all, and proceed to copy and build or fashion upon these models forms, evanescent and transcendent. Now, how do you say that? Here, did you? How do you say that?
Where are you looking?
The HITHERTO.
Hitherto.
That's how you say it, hitherto? Okay, thank you.
Hitherto. Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
So, the reason I included this reference was to show at what a causal level divine ideation is. It's what pre-exists all form manifestation, right? And then from that, the creative logi who emanate from the third logos have their understanding opened, and they see the ideal world hitherto concealed. That means before, concealed in the divine thought. So that's divine ideation, this concealing of the divine thought. The original intent, you could call it. Yeah. Okay. Next up, and the word which appeared as a pillar of flame out of the darkness is the Son of God, born of the mystery of the mind. So, just now what came to my mind is the mandorla, or called the vesica Pisces, where you have two interrelated circles with that center connection, which is like, if I'd have thought of it before, I would have included an illustration of it, which is like a pillar of flame, which is born of the two aspects, right? But at any rate, notice how similar this description is to the emergence of Oeaohu the Younger, which we read about in stanza 3, verse 7 of the Secret Doctrine. Both emerge from darkness. One as the blazing dragon of wisdom, the other as a pillar of flame. Both are the sun. One is the word which, one of dark space, the other of the mystery of mind. One is the word which appeared, the other is a description of the logos, which means word. So the mystery of mind is divine ideation, which becomes mahat in manifestation, which is in turn impressed on substance by means of fohat, to become consciousness. Okay, so that's the descent. You have the divine ideation, which becomes mahat, a principle which is carried by fohat, impressed on the material aspect to become consciousness. All right, next up, the name of that word is reason. Earlier, we learned that the word is the voice of the light. Thus, reason, which uses the intuition as its vehicle, is the voice of Mander. Next, the name of the word is reason. Wait a minute, I just did that. Next, reason is the offspring of thought. DK gives deeper insight into thought as here described. This isn't lower mind thought. Could we get a reader for this, please?
The building devas are the Ahi, or universal mind. They contain within their consciousness the plan logoic and inherently possess the power to work with it out in time and space, being the conscious forces of evolution. They not only embody the divine thought, but are that through which it manifests in its actuating activity. They are essentially motion.
Yeah. Okay. Remember intelligent activity? That's where the motion comes in. So these Ahi not only embody the divine thought, with the emphasis on embody, but are that through which it manifests. It's how it gets here from there, right? And becomes its actuating activity. So with that in mind, we might surmise that the god Thoth is a collective personification of these Ahis, and thus of thought as here used. This would make Thoth an emanation from Mander, since he is divine mind or divine ideation. So according to our text, we have one Mander, the primordial light, emanating two, thought or divine ideation, emanating three, the word whose name is reason, which is the voice of the light, Mander. Okay. Next, reason shall divide the light from the darkness and establish truth in the midst of the waters. This is a different darkness. The darkness from which primordial light emerges is the darkness of no number, of non-being, the source of light. The darkness here described is the darkness of matter and of ignorance. This also refers to a lower aspect of light, a light, it is suggested, that can be accessed while within the darkness of matter in order to know truth. This is done by building the Antakarana, thus allowing one to access the intuition, the vehicle of reason. Any thoughts or questions about these ideas? Okay, next up.
I could just say that this is it strikes me as really important discourse in terms of understanding better the oppositions. I appreciate what you had said earlier about the line of descent into materiality. And it almost, well, it does. It illustrates the increasing complexity and the need for finer distinctions as the mind.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you, Martha. Yeah. Anyone else? I thought I saw.
Yeah, Scott's got his hand. Yeah. Scott, go ahead.
You're applying this, I think, appropriately to the cosmic physical plane. But if you bump this all up and deal with all 7 of the cosmic planes, reason here on the 4th plane is, it's a bigger picture, right? We're dealing with the 4th plane of the 7 cosmic planes. Is that not where this has its origin in terms of application? And then it's reflected?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I do think so. There's such an intermingling of substantive cause and effect and a noumenal cause and effect. But, everything in the description of this Pymander, here it is. I, thy God, am the light and the mind, which before substance was divided from spirit. That takes you, all the way before any of these planes were delineated. In fact, this description, where the word goes forth and separates the water and earth elements from the fire and air elements, suggests that it was actually predates, if you want to use that word, the formation of the planes at all, including the cosmic, so which would mean that you really are looking at that highest level of the cosmic plane. And in other words, they're universal logi. But as we've learned in the secret doctrine, these also have a systemic reference. The whole thing, can be seen in terms of mirroring the cosmic on a systemic level. Because you really have to wonder if an incarnated avatar on planet Earth could have an experience of the universal logos. I'm not saying he couldn't. I'm just saying those are the questions you have to grapple with, because like in the secret doctrine, there's such an intermixture of systemic and cosmic language, that you're always trying to figure out. And often it's not a problem because it applies at both levels, but you have to, consider it and the effects of it at each level. I don't know if that made any sense, but.
Yeah.
Okay. So next part. Understand, O Hermes, and meditate deeply upon the mystery. That which in you sees and hears is not of the earth, but is the word of God incarnate. Well, that puts it at a soul level. So it is said that divine light dwells in the midst of mortal darkness. He's suggesting here that even though you're in incarnation, which is mortal darkness, that there is divine light within. So the word of God and the divine light are aspects of the soul perceived through the higher correspondences of hearing and sight. Here, Pymander is asking Hermes to see and hear through his soul instead of personality. Technically, that relates to it could be suggested that we'd be looking at the hearing, which results in comprehension, or you could say has its root in comprehension, right? And on the mental plane, it's higher clairaudience, and divine vision, which is not really that descriptive, but it suggests an awareness of source that is beyond just eye seeing, EYE, seeing, and the seeing that's done by the physical eye, right? Okay. Next, the union of the word and the mind produces that mystery which is called life. At its most inclusive level, and see, this again gets us into that duality Scott and I were just talking about. At the most inclusive level, the life described here is spirit-infused substance, both on the mental plane, cosmic mental and physical mental, which is what Pymander is here describing. So in this place, there manifests a self-realized form of life called the second birth, which comes through conscious awareness on the plane of higher mind. That's where this mixture of the word and mind produce what is called life. I would say this is like a third initiation level of understanding. This is the, quote, union of the word and the mind, also called a soul-infused personality, at least when one is incarnation and has this understanding. Okay, it gets pretty abstract, I realize, but it's I'm astonished by this vision because it reads like old commentary, which came out in, the 1880s through HPB and the 1920s through DK. But this is, second century BC level of stuff. So that makes it all the more amazing. Okay, next up. As the darkness without you is divided against itself, so the darkness within you is likewise divided. The light and the fire which rise are the divine man. Again, we have a kind of separation of the elements going on here. Ascending in the path of the word, that was the means by which air and fire were separated from water and earth. And that which fails to ascend is the mortal man, which may not partake of immortality. So we have a kind of microcosmic version of what was described macrocosmically earlier in the dialogue. The second half of the statement explains the first half. As we respond to the word, the still small voice of the soul, we come to identify with that soul and thus separate ourselves from the darkness of personality identification, which, quote, may not partake of immortality. Do you understand this? Makes sense. All right. Finally, learn deeply of the mind and its mystery, for therein lies the secret of immortality. Could we get a reader for this short quote from Discipleship in the New Age?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The mind creates or formulates those thought forms for embodied energies which express upon the mental plane the measure of the disciple's understanding of the plan and his ability to convey the embodied mental energy to the etheric body, unimpeded by the emotional nature or by any lower upsurging desire. So the way you're laying out these readings is brilliant. It's the best I can do, but they explain each other in some ways.
Well, good. The whole idea is to hopefully that it, that it adds insight, to this narrative. The problem is it also interrupts the narrative, as does my commentary. From one point of view, I'd recommend that all of you just go back and read this narrative straight through, because there's something gained in that cohesion, but that wouldn't make much of a webinar if we just read through the narrative without comment, right? So that's something that, if you're really interested in this, especially this part, because it's a whole vision that came to Hermes, and it's you'll get more of a sense of it if you read it straight through. Okay, so key here is ability to convey the embodied mental energy to the etheric body, which then in turn allows that energy to reach the brain, right? In other words, that you can become consciously aware of this soul impress in waking consciousness. Okay, finally, let's see, no, we did it finally. We're ready for a new read. Could we get a reader, please?
God, can you read that, please?
Did we just do this?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Mhm. The dragon again revealed its form to Hermes, and for a long time the two looked steadfastly one upon the other, eye to eye, so that Hermes trembled before the gaze of Pymandres. At the word of the dragon, the heavens opened, and innumerable light powers were revealed, soaring through cosmos on pinions of streaming fire. Hermes beheld the spirit of the stars and the celestials controlling the universe, and all those powers which shine with the radiance of the one fire, the glory of the sovereign mind. Hermes realized that the sight which he beheld was revealed to him only because Pymandres had spoken a word. The word was reason, and by the reason of the word, invisible things were made manifest. Divine Mind, the dragon, continued its discourse.
So this is kind of the high watermark of this discourse, and you can see you rarely visit this kind of exalted causal levels in any narrative. It's truly extraordinary. Okay, but enough gushing. First off, the dragon again revealed its form to Hermes, and for a long time the two looked steadfastly one upon the other, eye to eye. I can't help but think that staring into the eyes of such a one had to have been by design to open Hermes' third eye, right? His Ajna center, thus making possible that which follows after this statement, right? Next, at the word of the dragon, the heavens opened and the innumerable light powers were revealed, soaring through cosmos on pinions of streaming fire. Again, the word plays the dominant role. What's astonishing about Hermes' vision is that it reaches beyond the solar system, as suggested in the next passage. Hermes beheld the spirits of the stars, the celestials controlling the universe, and all those powers which shine with the radiance of the one fire, the glory of the sovereign mind. I think, to me, this sentence is the highest arc of this whole narrative right here. So this extra systemic revelation is the highest that I've ever come across in any reading, any writing. Certain stanzas in a treatise on cosmic fire are at this level. Notice that the Hermes did not just behold the stars. It was like removed from our solar system to journey with Pymander to see these spirits or these stars, but the spirits of the stars, meaning somehow he was viewing the essence of these solar logi, and at an even higher level, all those powers which shine with the radiance of the one fire, which could be cosmic electric fire. So obviously, even though this all was opened for him by Pymander and by the word that Pymander spoke, Hermes was and is a very high initiate, at least a master of wisdom, because only one such as that could, sustain such a vision. Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay, again, the focus returns to the word. Hermes realized that the sight which he beheld was revealed to him only because Mander had spoken a word. The word was reason, and by the reason of the word, invisible things were made manifest. The word, as here described, and when spoken by one who has the spiritual authority to do so, in other words, it's not just something, somebody gives you, you memorize and you've got it. It has to also be uttered by such a one that has the spiritual authority, becomes a means of vibratorily aligning the perceptive mechanism of one who normally would not be able to have such an experience with these higher realities. Since the potency of such an experience would be algorithmically greater than, say, a vision of one's soul, the word, or the great one uttering it, would also need to afford a protection against being overloaded by such a vision. Without this protection, well, the image that comes to mind is screwing a 100-watt light bulb into the main power outlet of Hoover Dam, right? So all this had to be controlled and regulated and stepped down by Mander so that Hermes could have a meaningful experience, and also one that would stay with him so that he could then go out and teach us. The whole thing is really extraordinary in that way. Any thoughts about this? Okay, next up. Divine Mind, the dragon, continued its discourse. Could we get a reader, please?
Vivian, can you read that, please?
Before the visible universe was formed, its mold was cast. This mold was called the archetype, and this archetype was in the supreme mind long before the process of creation began. Beholding the archetypes, the supreme mind became enamored with its own thought. So, taking the word as a mighty hammer, it gouged out caverns in primordial space and cast the form of the spheres in the archetypal mold, at the same time sowing in the newly fashioned bodies the seeds of living things. The darkness below, receiving the hammer of the word, was fashioned into an orderly universe. The elements separated into strata, and each brought forth living creatures. The Supreme Being, the mind, male and female, brought forth the word, and the word, suspended between light and darkness, was delivered of another mind called the workman, the master builder, or the maker of things.
Okay, so with this passage, we move into pure philosophy. First up, before the, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Yvonne's got her hand up.
Great.
What you just read reminds me of white magic, creating on the mental plane, and directions to the builders, the devas that are going to create what you've spoken. This is just coming from the mental plane, down to the astral and then to the physical, don't you think?
Oh yeah, it is a demonstration of white magic. There's no question of that, right? That's how it's done. Thank you for that. It's good, good observation. Okay, anyone else? Any thoughts? Okay, so before the visible universe was formed, its mold was cast. This mold was called the archetype. And this archetype was in the supreme mind long before the process of creation began. So this follows exactly the sequence as given in a treatise on cosmic fire. Could we get a reader, please? This is a little short.
Yeah, And Veronica, can you read that? Also, I wanted to say that she typed in there, Master Builder is the second ray.
Right. That's one of the names of the second ray. Yeah. Reader, please.
First, the etheric body is mold of the physical body. Second, the etheric body is the archetype upon which the dense physical form is built, whether it is form of a solar system or of a human body in any one incarnation.
Okay, so you see the same language is being used, the mold and the archetype, right? We've just been told here, for the visible universe was formed, its mold was cast. The mold was called the archetype, right? So this is all etheric. This is the initial etheric creation, right? Which is actually brought into form through prana. Cosmic prana is the vehicle for this what's being described here. Okay. Next, beholding the archetypes, the supreme mind, remember, supreme mind, Mander identifies himself as the supreme mind, became enamored of its own thought. Okay. You know, you really wonder if somebody at this level could be enamored. You know, it's such an astral term, but it's a metaphor for the, you know, the will to be, the desire to manifest, which is the will to be. So we often find this theme of deity being enamored with its own thought or image in mythology. For example, Dionysus was given a mirror and while gazing into it, was torn into 7 pieces by 2 titans. Titans are the forces of the material universe. The 7 parts that he was torn into represent the 7 sheaths or aspects of a human being. So if you come into physical manifestation, that's how it demonstrates through this 7-fold through the 7 sheaths. In theosophy, the surge of deity is called the will to be. Let's see, where am I? Okay, I think I have this. Wow, I'm missing one. Sorry about that. We'll go and see. Where's my hammer? I'm going to go here because, so I'm missing this fragment. So taking the word as a mighty hammer, it gouged out caverns in primordial space. What an image, huh? Again, the focus of the narrative is on the word. When a hammer is used in a creation story, it is esoterically referring to the swastika, as here described by HPB. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, first I want to say that Lyda Maria says, can the 4 objects in the figure represent manifestation? It seems to be following from a place where heart is located, enamorated is associated with the heart center. I think that was the previous image you just showed.
This image?
I think so.
Yeah, because I had no
and
other.
Anne Veronica said,
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Lyda
Right.
Maria, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong.
Yeah, open up.
No, she says no, the original figure. Please talk to us so we know what you're talking about.
Let's see, the original image. I'm not sure, see what you mean, because we've just been in text for a while now. I don't know what you mean by the original image. You want to describe it?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was talking about the figure Hermes is where the text, all the text is that we are talking about. There are 4 elements. So the builders, the 4th, and then it seems like, or they are falling down or going back to someplace around the heart. Yeah, is that figure that you are showing?
What was that last part?
Is the figure that you have in the screen?
Right here, this one.
Yeah, there are 4 elements: the globe.
Okay. Hang on a sec. That's ages back, but that's fine. Let me find it. I want to keep our place, which is on.
You have it in the screen.
I know, but I can give you a better image here. That's the one,
Oh.
right? Okay. And
And
now,
then the element seems to be going down, or you can also interpret as cycling, going back and going forward.
yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah.
And then there is the ignorance that is represented by the, I don't know how you call that animal that is in the bottom.
And what did you say was represented by that? It's called a dragon or apophis. It's the lower mind is really what it is.
Yeah, so it came to my intuition that is somehow related with the lower mind. What we were discussing, the manifestation from the above and below. So those 4 elements maybe is a creation manifesting in the lower plane.
Mm-hmm. So are you thinking these 4 elements here, the symbols? Is that
like the globe, the triangle, and then the face, and to me the last seems like a bread or something, and then the wine, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I see what you mean. I like the idea of cycling, and that there's, that there is probably also purpose to their position around Herm Anubis here.
Yeah. And I know it's like the chakras, the manifestation, the globe is coming pretty close from below the heart or something around there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just ideas.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Anne Veronica, you had some comments about that. Do you want to speak, please?
Well, it was what Maria said. It's like the formation coming down, and I was saying that the vessel, it's like life going into a vessel and confining itself.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that both of these objects that I'm pointing to here are vessels, and that they are at the lowest level of this illustration, suggesting that they're that they represent a form aspect.
And I think the tail of the dragon looks like a snake. I'm not sure. So if we see it cyclically.
Right there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting. It is. I hadn't noticed that. Yeah. Yeah. It represents that it's a dual dragon. There's 2 snakes. Hercules in his crib, he held up the pairs of opposites. And you also see this in the prototype of Hercules called Heru. You see him holding out a pair of snakes as a very young boy. And it represents, that he was born into this awareness, this level of awareness. Okay, anyway, let's get back to here and read this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Yvonne says, why is the globe embedded in the liver?
I couldn't tell you. He was, I really can't. I'm not sure that that's intentional. I can't. I thought about it. I don't know that that's, there's one one thing you could say is that he himself, as that singular Herm Anubis, represents, you could say from one point of view, all physicality, and as do all those symbols, and that would be represented by the globe. But that's a stretch. I don't really know. If anybody has any insight, jump on it. I'm curious that, that was like an hour and 15 minutes ago, and people are just now responding to that, but that's all right.
Well, no, because you show it every time you show that page. So every passage that we have from it has that same image. And so,
that's why.
yeah, so people are looking at it.
That's
why. That's why.
Thanks, Bill. I couldn't figure it out. That's why.
Yeah. They've been thinking about it the whole time, but you continue to show the picture. So
it's a good thing.
Okay. As far as reading for the next page, Yvonne, can you do that for us, please?
Sure. The swastika, and then how do you say that? Manji?
G, yeah.
Manji. Then came the sons of Thor. They brought Mjolnir with them, no longer as a weapon of war, but as the hammer with which to consecrate the new heaven and the new earth. Verily, many are its meanings. In the macrocosmic work, the hammer of creation, with its forearms bent at right angles, refers to the continual motion and revolution of the invisible cosmos of forces. In that of the manifested cosmos and our earth, it points to the rotation in the cycles of time of the world's axes and their equatorial belts. The two lines forming the swastika, meaning spirit and matter, the four hooks suggesting the motion in the revolving cycles. Applied to the microcosm man, it shows him to be a link between heaven and earth, the right hand being raised at the end of a horizontal arm, the left pointing to the earth. In the Smaragdine tablets of Hermes, the uplifted right hand is inscribed with the word solve, the left with the word coagula. It is at one and at the same time alchemical, cosmogonical, anthropological, and magical sign with 7 keys to its inner meaning. It is not too much to say that the compound symbolism of this universal and most suggestive of signs contains the key to the 7 great mysteries of cosmos.
Okay, so this is the Thor's hammer that we were talking about before, right? The word is a mighty hammer. I didn't include that slide, but so that's, and this quote is important. Then came the sons of Thor. So, it's, yeah. This hammer of Thor also has electrical connotations, and I think that's because all creation on the cosmic physical plane was a result of the binding of form and spirit through Valhalla, right? And that is part of this hammer of Thor that's being described here. But I thought it was interesting how closely this latter part with the horizontal, with the 2 arms, describes the first arcanum of the Tarot, right? I couldn't find this image that's in the Smaragdine tablet of Hermes, which has Solve and Coagula written on them. But anyway.
Hold on. I just wanted you to know that Anne Veronica says that Smaragdine equals emerald. So it's the emerald tablet.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
And then Scott has his hand up.
Yo.
Yeah. 2 things here. I think is it HPB or DK talks about the rotation of the swastika and the manji. The fact that the swastika, as it turns counterclockwise. The manji turns clockwise.
Yes.
And the thought at the bottom of the first column there is interesting, looking at the cycles of time of the world's axes and their equatorial belts, which suggests you have one of those, the vertical line going over the poles, as it was, and the horizontal one across the middle being around the equator. So you have a double rotation forming a sphere.
Yeah, it's the you could say it's the energetic signature of the turning of the globe with the axes and the equatorial.
So it goes from a square form or rectilinear to a sphere.
Yeah. So you have the axes of the sphere represented here, right? Depending on which way you're going here. You know, the vertical axis and the horizontal, and then the upturned ends represent the particular motion, because without those, no direction is indicated, right? So as you said, swastika is a counterclockwise motion, and manji is a clockwise motion. Both, you know, one is involutional, one is evolutional in its, you know, in its implementation, though that's not the only place that they could be considered. You know, I would think all motion would be characterized by the motion indicated in these two forms, right? It'd be interesting to know more about their distinction, you know, in terms of, you know, what one motion is compared to the other. Yeah, go ahead.
You read, must be in DK. It was too early for HVB that the Nazis used the swastika because it's involutional counterclockwise.
Yeah. Yes, but you know, I think
it has its own place, and
yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, that doesn't mean the swastika is evil in a context of spiritual symbology. It just means that isolated, it was able to further their ends. And of course, they did that with other symbols as too, like the eagle, you know, which they misused also similarly, you know. Yeah. In fact, the two symbols together are often used. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
There's a question from Janet. She says, and the reversal of the wheel. You know, you were talking about the involution and the evolution in the directions. She asks, and the reversal of the wheel.
Yeah, in terms of, you're talking about the direction that you move through the signs astrologically, in which case the swastika would be, let's see, isn't it counterclockwise? The signs move counterclockwise. Help me here, BL. And that when you, and that
I always have to map it out and do the thing.
Yeah.
It's counterclockwise, you know, Aries to Taurus to in the chart.
That's counterclockwise.
It's counterclockwise.
Right. So
that's
that
counterclockwise. And then
clockwise. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Clockwise would be going through it the opposite. Okay. And that's what he talks about when DK talks about we're going through the signs in the wrong order. All right. So in involution, yeah, that's the clockwise motion, actually.
See, that's why
you know, so
you can't, you know, there isn't a final interpretation in terms of right or wrong direction. It depends on its application. So in the case of, you know, passage through the signs, this left symbol represents the proper motion through the signs. And the manji is the personality means before the reversal on the wheel of evolution, right? I saw Yvonne's hand up.
Yes, I think we reverse the signs in Libra, and from we go, when we step onto the path, we go in a counterclockwise way around the zodiac.
When you reverse the wheel.
When we reverse the wheel, and supposedly it's in Libra that it's done, right, BL?
Well, as I understand it,
Uh,
that's the sign where you reach an equipoise. And then at that point, you can either go back to the wrong way of doing it, or, or you can go forward into Scorpio and assume the new direction. But it's really in Scorpio that the new direction is actually instigated, even though the place of balance or the equipoise is in Libra. Is that how you understand it? Yeah.
yes, yes.
Okay. Thanks, Yvonne.
And then and Veronica says it's 2 rods of fire. The way it turns, the fire goes the other way. And if seen from above, and if it is turning clockwise, seen from below, it goes counterclockwise.
That's right. So it's also oriented to perspective. This either one of these is its opposite when seen from the different perspective. If you're looking at this from below, it's as represented, and then if you shift your perspective to above, they would reverse in terms of the directions they assume. Anyway, we got an idea of this, right? Any more thoughts about this? I love the description here that it digs holes in space, and that this is actually the motion, you could say, of the hammer, right? Pretty interesting. Let me go back there. So one I didn't include. Taking the word as a mighty hammer, it gouged out caverns in primordial space. So, and then that is, what that the motion of that hammer that does the gouging are these 2 forms. Okay, next up. And cast the form of the spheres in the archetypal mold. The forms of the sphere is designed by the great architect, a name of the 3rd ray logos. The archetypal mold in which this design was cast is the mold of the etheric body. Okay, so the divine builder is the name of the 2nd ray, a name of the 2nd ray Lord. The divine, or the great architect, is a name of the 3rd ray Lord. Next, at the same time, sowing in the newly fashioned bodies the seeds of living things. At the same time. So this is a dual aspect to this hammer, which is the swastika and the manji, that as it digs holes in space, it also fashions at the same time sowing in the newly fashioned bodies the seeds of living things. This is the work of Thoth, which is who binds spirit and matter together, right? Next, the darkness below, receiving the hammer of the word, was fashioned into an orderly universe. The elements separated into strata, and each brought forth living creatures. So remember, in the early part of this narrative, the word was used to separate the elements, right? Remember that earth and water could not respond to the word, and that air and fire were lifted or responded to it. The 2nd stanza of Zan, from a treatise on cosmic fire, describes this in sequential detail, describes this process of fashioning an orderly universe, right? But let's just take a look at the first 3 short paragraphs. Could we get a reader for that, please? Just to get a sense.
Andrea, can you read that, please?
Yep. Stanza 2. Om, said the mighty one, and sounded forth the word. The sevenfold waves of matter resolved themselves, and varied forms appeared. Each took its place, each in the sphere ordained. They waited for the sacred flood to enter and to fill. The builders responded to the sacred sound. In musical collaboration, they attended to the work. They built in many spheres, beginning with the third. Upon this plane, their work commenced. They built the sheath of Atma and strung it to its primary. Om, said the mighty one, let now the work proceed. Let the builders of the air continue with the plan.
And, from that point on, they build the Buddhic plane and then right on down. So you can see the strong connection between this old commentary and the narrative that we're reading. Okay, let's see. So next up, the Supreme Being, the mind, male and female, brought forth the word. Those of you who also attend the Secret Doctrine webinars might remember that the word, or Vash, is the mother, wife, and daughter of the Logos. The female mind, here described, is the co-equal or wife, quote unquote, aspect of the Logos. The aspect of the word sent forth is the daughter aspect. Next. And the word suspended between light and darkness was delivered of another mind called the workman, the master builder, or the maker of things. So the master builder is a Masonic term, an epithet for the great architect of the universe, who in our system is the solar logos. Interestingly, master builder is one of the names of the second ray lord, whereas, and I mentioned this before, the great architect is one of the names of the third ray lord. The idea of suspension between light and darkness is described in stanza 3, verse 10 of the stanzas of Zahn. Father, mother spin a web whose upper end is fastened to spirit, the light of the one darkness, and the lower one to its shadowy end, matter. And this web is the universe, spun out of the 2 substances made in one, which is Svabhavat. Nothing like old commentary. So DK gives us, how are we doing? We can do this and that'll be it. DK gives us further insight on the connection between the word and creation in this quote from TCF. Could we get a reader, please?
Having sounded the word, the first aspect, represented by the electric fire at the center of the lotus, sinks back into quiescence and becomes an abstraction as far as the self-conscious unit is concerned. The work has been begun. The necessary vibration has been set up, and the whole process then proceeds under law. The solar angels have begun their activity, and until their work has reached a very high stage, the spirit aspect must become, in the causal body, an analogy to the silent watcher. As the solar angels continue sounding out the mantram, which is the basis of their work, the lunar Petries respond to certain sounds in that mantram. Not all by any means at first, and gather out of those sounds the formula under which their work must proceed. So the word is the basis of the mantram, and the mantram is the basis of the formula.
So this is really important occult information. You can see at the center of creation is the word, which is the, as he says here, forms the fundamental of the mantra, right? It conditions the entire mantra, that word. Remember, this is, this isn't some particular word that you could spell out so much as a particular quality of emanatory vibration, right? And then the mantra becomes the basis of the formula. So it moves into diversity and into complexity. And then that which is needed to do the building is pulled out of the formula by the lunar Petries in order to create the specific forms that they use. Okay, any thoughts about this and about the whole idea of the word, which has really dominated this Hermes narrative? All righty then, that's going to do it for this time.
I just wanted to add one point, that the word dominates the Hermes narrative. And of course, we also consider him the messenger of the gods.
Yeah.
So that seems very appropriate to me.
Indeed.
May I also just throw in John, the Gospel of John? In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Yeah. The borrowing, intense borrowing of all religion is just permeates all this.
Yes, indeed. And the most esoteric part of that statement is the Word was God. Because that's like the statement in DK that says indigo is the goal of endeavor. In other words, it brings an abstraction into where we are normally imagining some form aspect. The Word was God, Anyway.
And then after that, the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us.
And that's what's being described here, isn't it? It was made flesh through the Ahis and through these lunar Petries who responded to, the mantras and the formulas of the word. So, yeah, thank you, Martha. Okay, you all, let's set up dates for next time. This coming Friday will be the 4th webinar on the secret doctrine. It's going well. We're talking a lot about the etheric vehicle and prana. I think people are finding it interesting. If you want to join us, you can do so on moriafederation.com. So other than that, BL?
Okay, so our next Secret Teaching of All Ages is going to be on the 4th of September at 7 p.m. But before that, not only do we have Francis's TCF on the 2nd and 4th Fridays, but on the 3rd Sunday, the 21st of August, we have the next Secret Doctrine. So hope to see you all
21st,
there.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, 21st.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you all for attending, and I'll see you next time. Also, this Thursday, we're having a pre-full moon webinar, which you can sign up also at moriafederation.com. Okay, bye for now. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.